Hi everyone, welcome back to our YouTube channel and our latest video for you. So today we are doing a deep dive into refurbishment bridging. So I'm going to talk about how it works, who it's relevant for, and then at the end I will talk to you about a few things that you need to watch out for to make sure that you don't get stung. So this is the most requested topic really with a lot of my clients. They need to know how to access the most funding that they can access, and this really is the way to borrow the most amount of money up front for your next project. Before I get into it, please give us a like and subscribe, and then you'll be notified around our next videos. And please share this to anyone that you think would enjoy the video as well. So, what is refurbishment bridging? So refurbishment bridging is a bridge that allows you to purchase the property and gives you funds towards that purchase, and then it funds the refurbishment works for you as well. So what's it used for, and who is it relevant for? So it allows you to borrow more money than you would do on a standard bridge in order to purchase a property and then carry out extensive refurbishments to that property. So I would say usually if you're spending less than 60 or 70,000 on the refurbishment, you would be able to access more money by borrowing lots up front and then you fund the works. If it's more than that, for the bigger refurbishment, then a refurbishment bridge would allow you to borrow more money overall. So that's something to think about whether it's relevant for you. So for larger projects, HMO conversions, commercial to residential, if you've got blocks of flats, there's loads of different scenarios that we could use, but on the whole it is a larger refurbishment, so more than kind of 70,000 on your spend. The other thing to watch out for is that we can only use the end value, the GDV, of something that we have planning for. So this is something that comes up quite often where clients are converting property to HMOs, commercial to residential under PD, loads of different scenarios where you can do something without planning, or you're under PD, but ideally what you want to do needs full planning. So we just need to work with that and just make sure we've got a backup plan that is profitable, just to make sure that it all goes through. Commercial to residential is a good example. If you've got a property that you'd like to do something that needs full planning, but you can do something under PD, that works really well. A similar example with HMOs would be if you can convert it to a 6-bed under PD, if it's outside of Article 4, and then your ideal scenario would be to convert it to 7 or 8, for example. So we can work with both scenarios, but we've got the backup plan. So how does it work? So the way that these bridging companies work out how much money to lend to you is all around the GDV. So they will lend you a maximum of 70% of that GDV. Now that is key because when you come to refinance, you'll be refinancing at 75% of the GDV. So we've only got an additional 5% that you can borrow at that refinance point. It's really important that we have that buffer for a couple of reasons. We want to make sure that if there is a change in the market, if there's a change in the valuation, that we're able to cover that. What you don't want to do is not be able to repay that bridge when you refinance. Also, if there's an overspend on your costings, obviously we still want you to be able to borrow that back again. There's a few different reasons, but it's something to bear in mind if you are borrowing money from an external investor as well as your bridge. How are you going to repay that? Because normally we're only able to release that 5% on the refinance. There's not a huge amount of additional borrowing at that point to repay an investor. Something to consider. So we've got the 70% of our GDV. Now out of that 70%, there are costs that have to be paid for. So the refurbishment costs will always be funded in full, and the lender will normally want a 10% contingency included and all the professional fees included within that as well. They want the facility to be able to lend you all the money that is required to do that job. Reason being, if you're not able to complete on that and they need to move it to somewhere else, they need to finish it, they need to make sure there's enough room in that deal for that. And then all the fees and interest is always retained for the full 12 months or longer if you're having a longer bridge. Also all that money needs to come off as well. And then what is left is your day one loan. Now, the maximum you'll be able to borrow on day one is 75% of your purchase price, but quite often, particularly with HMO conversions, you're likely to get in the region of 55 to 60% of your purchase price. And the reason for that is that HMO conversions particularly don't tend to be that profitable. If you've got a really profitable deal as a standalone refurbishment project, you'll be able to get 75%. But from what I see on a day-to-day basis, that's unlikely. So lots of lenders advertise that they can get 75%, and we have lots of lenders that will do that, but what you actually get will depend on how profitable your deal is. One I was looking at this morning literally breaks even, I think it's at -2% as a standalone deal, and they are getting around 50% of the purchase price up front. So just bear that in mind. And as I said before, looking at external investors, if you are topping up your deposit with an external investor, make sure that you can refinance that at the end. Even on a 500,000 GDV, you're only going to be releasing 5% of that, so 25,000 on the exit. So just bear in mind that you're not overborrowing at the beginning. So that's really how it works. We do loads of these types of deals, and they are really, really helpful for a couple of reasons. So what you need to be thinking is, if you're trying to recycle your money, this is a great way of doing that. It means that you're putting in a much lower amount to start with, and you're not requiring all the money up front. So a lot of the time, if you're using a standard bridge, there's a lot of initial investment. You obviously get more back on the refinance, but you need that money to start with, whereas in this instance you don't need the money to start with in the same way. So that's that. And I promised you some top tips, didn't I? Make sure you don't get caught out. So the difficulty with this sort of bridge is that there are a lot of moving parts. So when I give a client a quote at the beginning, we're basing it on, obviously the purchase price, but the GDV is an estimate, and the cost of works at that point is an estimate. So my big top tip is to make sure that you're being really realistic with those figures, because if there is a reduction in the GDV when the valuation comes back, or there is an increase in the build cost when we get the contractor quotes, the amount that you get on day one will reduce. So if you're going into this and you're so tight on your numbers that there's no leeway, that could present a problem, because there are just more moving parts. On a standard bridge, the only thing that it depends on is the valuation, really. And 9 times out of 10 on a purchase, the valuation will come in at the purchase price. So there's very little movement with the figures, whereas on this type of bridge, there is a lot more movement. So you need to make sure that you've got a contingency. You need to make sure you're being really realistic with those numbers. And the other thing is around experience. So we're seeing lenders be a bit more fussy in terms of what experience they're asking for, but we can get around that. So if you have done a similar project previously, that's absolutely fine. The lender acknowledges that you will, you'll move on and you'll do bigger projects, which might include planning, it might include conservation area, it might include Article 4, planning, commercial, anything like that. You're expected to, do a project, do it well, and then move on and do something a little bit bigger next time. But if you're jumping straight into doing a conversion to a 7-bed HMO, or conversion from commercial to resi, something along those lines, you've got no experience before, just bear in mind that we will be restricted as the lender we can go to, and it will be more expensive. But we can do it. A lot of lenders will rely on contractor experience where you haven't got the experience yourself. They recognise that it's not something you're going to be doing yourself, obviously. So if we've got a really experienced contractor, then that mitigates that risk. So in terms of finding a contractor, you really need to be picky if you haven't got the experience yourself. Make sure that they have done, I would say, 10 similar projects. So you need to be finding someone who is really experienced in the location that you are in, doing the types of projects that you are looking to do on this. So yeah, they're my top tips. But it's absolutely doable. It's doable on your first project. It's something that we do lots of. And if you want any more information, then please do book in a call. And yeah, give us a like and subscribe. I hope that was useful, and I'll be back next time with another deep dive.